Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Well, I'm going to introduce you to a delightful woman who has the greatest job in music here in South Florida, I think. Her name is Sharon McDaniel. She's a Regional Arts Programming Associate at the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts. Welcome to our show, Sharon.
Oh, thank you so much, Anita.
So, Sharon, when you were a little girl, did you like music? Is this something you just grew into, or was this always in your home?
Oh, it was definitely something that I begged my parents for, and begged and begged and begged and begged until finally they got a piano. And, of course, once I got the piano, I didn't want to practice, but they said, listen, the piano's in the house now. Nobody else is going to play it, so you're going to.
Okay, that'll teach you.
And my dad was also a member of the Columbia Record Club. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. In the Parade magazine, they used to advertise all those records.
Yes, absolutely. And he would get not CD, that back then it was the recording of the month.
That's right.
And I can remember listening to a recording of George Zell conducting the Cleveland Orchestra in Brahms Symphony No. 1. And that was it. I was hooked. That was it.
Wow, but your father actually had a great liking for this. What brought that on for him?
He was playing in his college band. And he didn't feel like he had a lot of background in music, so he wanted to get these recordings because they were the classics from Columbia Record Club. And he sort of self-taught himself about classical music, but it started from band practice.
Now that's beautiful. Well, okay, so let's now fast forward to you. So now tell us your history and how all this happened.
Well, basically, I decided that music was going to be the major part of my life, starting at about, I think you'd call it middle school or junior high school. And I decided I was going to go to the conservatory, and it was really difficult because you had to audition in those days, in person. So it meant a lot of travel, but I went to Cincinnati to the College Conservatory of Music, and I went to Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And they both accepted me at different times. So I have a degree in piano from Cincinnati and music theory degree from Eastman School. And
the best. Wow, that's not bad.
It's just been lovely. I discovered that I really liked working behind the scenes even more than I liked being on stage. So for me, it was a natural thing to get into arts administration, get into programming, get into what goes on with a touring orchestra and what the presenter needs to be involved with.
It's a big job because when I think about this, especially even looking, and I said to Sharon before that the picture of the Orchestra Romanian Symphony Orchestra on a cover of our November issue, for those of you I know who listen, also, of course, get Boomer Times, there are a lot of people there, and they don't just come casually. So that's your big job, isn't it? Okay, so now you've booked them. Now what?
Well, now we decide between us what we'd like for a program. And how many times do you want to hear Beethoven's Fifth, okay? Every orchestra wants to play Beethoven's Fifth, and you sort of have to tweak the programming a little bit and say, well, yes, but what about Tchaikovsky, or what about Dvorak? And that's how we kind of go back and forth in planning a program. But with orchestras like the National Symphony Orchestra of Romania, you want them to bring something that's specific to them, that says a lot about their musical heritage. And that's what the work by George Enescu is about, the Romanian Rhapsody No. 1. Not to mention, it was one of the first orchestral pieces that I fell in love with as a teenager. So it was a lovely idea to bring something that spoke to them, as well as the Dvorak from that same region of the world, too.
That's so interesting you say that. My family, my mother's side, they're Hungarian, and we always sat and listened to, of course, all the Hungarian music, and it was very important. And that's why I said our son took up the violin when he was little.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that's very important. And when my mother she lived to be 94, and in her
Lovely.
very last days, we actually brought in a student to play the violin for her once a week.
Oh, that's fabulous, yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
what
that means
music
a lot.
does, Sharon. As you said, it's inside you. It brings out something that's hard to explain. And I was just curious, though, so now you have a choice, because I was looking at your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice of so many orchestras from all over the world. How do you decide?
Well, actually, it's not as difficult as you might think. Some orchestras say they're going to come for a U.S. tour. They mean East Coast and West Coast. Others will say, oh, we're only going to make 4 or 5 stops in the California region, and that's going to be it. So of those that are going to be, say, coming as far south as North Carolina, Washington, D.C., that area, we can kind of hook onto that routing and say, okay, what's special about this group? And the idea that we have Christian Machelleroux is the conductor. He's been with us before. He is superb, just an outstanding young conductor. And when you hear him, there's so much passion and so much energy. I can understand completely why he's at the head of this Romanian orchestra now.
Okay, so now when you have, I would say, employed them in a sense, they're here usually, for a day or two? Not too long.
Not too long at all. Sometimes they will come in, fly into the Palm Beach airport, or sometimes it's the Miami airport, and then kind of come by bus to West Palm Beach, check into a hotel, and the next day perform. It's very hard on a group for them to come in the same day, rehearse, perform, and leave out the same day. They need a little bit more time than that. So it's a matter of where they're coming from and where they're going to next. If they're going to Vero Beach, yeah, sure, get them on the bus the next day, take them up to Vero, and have them perform that afternoon. So that works out quite well.
Well, I was going to just say something about that. When I remember, of course, I've lived here a long time, before we had the wonderful Kravis concert hall. And I remember it was very important to Alex Dreyfus that they contracted with the finest, I guess, audio engineer, acoustic engineer.
Oh, yes.
And you can't, so many times, I lived here, and I don't know how long you've been here, but I lived here when there's a thing called the leaky teepee. And it's
I missed
you probably
that.
heard about it, right? And we heard these kind of orchestras there. In fact, I heard Pavarotti there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and it's wonderful to hear orchestras, and but when you sit in the Kravis Center and you hear music like this, it doesn't get any better.
It's really a fabulous hall. And we celebrated the 25th anniversary 2 years ago. And it's still a quality hall. It doesn't show its age. And there, I think, is built into it are the abilities to change some dynamics or change some aspects of the acoustics so that you can actually get the best sound for each organization. And that's without giving up any of the, true sound of the orchestra or making anything sound amplified or artificial, because it's not.
Yes. Well, I don't want to run out of time before you go down the list, so our listeners can start to get subscriptions to the regional arts and all the all the orchestras you're being in. So I'm going to let you just tell us.
Okay. Oh, well, the Shanghai Shanghai Opera Symphony Orchestra is coming on January 28th. And this is a new orchestra to us. Every once in a while, we bring in a group that's making their local debut, and this is one. And the interesting thing about this is this organization plays full-time opera and orchestral music. And they're going to bring in one of their operatic works by Verdi, and they're going to bring in one of the big orchestral works, the Rachmaninoff Symphony No. 2, that dreamy work that everybody loves. They're also going to play the Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto, and that is another, well, I won't call it a war horse because it's just such a wonderful piece of music. So that's going to be, for all of us, a new introduction.
Great. Looking forward to that.
And next after that, we have the Israel Philharmonic. Israel Philharmonic has been with us so many times. It's wonderful to have them back. And Zubin Mehta will be with us. He's the outgoing now music director. Actually, he's the music director for life of the Israel Philharmonic. So that's always a very special evening.
Oh, absolutely. So he's coming himself. See, that's spectacular to have Zubin Mehta there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Has such a unique take on these large romantic pieces that you only get when you have an orchestra as good as the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra is.
And they actually come from Israel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Interestingly, though, if you look at the roster for the orchestra, musicians come from everywhere. There are American players, there are Japanese players, there are Chinese. And, a majority of the orchestra is from Israel, but music doesn't have any borders anymore, it seems.
A good point. Good point. Okay, so now that we're catching our breath, and it's like, what do you do for an encore?
Well, then we bring in another favorite of our audiences, the Russian National Orchestra. And Russian National is coming with one of its key conductors, Kirill Kravis, and they're bringing a young American piano soloist, George Lee, who is just going to knock your socks off. It's an all Rachmaninoff program, and he's going to be playing the Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2. And I tell you, it's so amazing when you hear a young soloist, and you suddenly stop and play. Who is that? What was his name? What? And that's the sort of reaction we heard as soon as we heard him. So his name is George Lee. Remember the name.
Okay, we will. And I love Rachmaninoff. Oh, my heavens, that's my favorite. So that should be fantastic.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, yeah. And there's the Chicago Symphony Orchestra coming after that. The Chicago Symphony is one of the world's great orchestras. I won't simply call it a great American orchestra because they're just in a class that's not merely American. And Riccardo Muti, their renowned conductor, will also be with us in an all Beethoven program.
And how long, just curious, when did symphonies really start like this in huge symphonies? I'm sure in the 1800s.
Oh, they'd been going on before the 1800s. Because in 1800, Beethoven was writing his first symphonies, and he had to have that kind of orchestra established before he could have literally put a symphony like that together. So if you look back to Mozart, who was born in 1756, he was playing with orchestras as a soloist, violinist, and pianist, and also writing for orchestras as early as the 1760s. So it goes back quite a bit further than most people realize.
Yeah, I was, as you were saying that, I was saying, yes, of course, it's 1700s. And I, we're going to have you back again. We're not closed yet, but because there's a lot more we want to talk about. But I wanted to ask you, have instruments changed?
Oh, yes, very definitely. Yeah, they've gone through transitions. Every musician, every instrument in the orchestra has had, shall we say, technical improvements to it over the decades, over the centuries. And that's in most cases. But in other cases, there are things like the Stradivarius violins.
Right.
They were built in the 1600s, and they are just simply getting older with age. There's nothing you need to do to improve that but to put it in the hands of a fabulous artist. But, for example, the flute and the oboe, the bassoon, all of those woodwind instruments developed and became much more, they could project more. They weren't the nice, soft little recorder that you heard in the back of the salon. They became the flute that projects to the back of the orchestra hall. So, yeah, lots of changes throughout the centuries.
Okay, so let's see if we can get through after Chicago. Now, we just finished February. That was February 26th. Right. Now we're into March.
March, yeah.
Yes.
It opens up with Itzhak Perlman.
Talk
March
about
3.
violins, right?
Oh, heavens, yes. He's a great fan of our audience, and he likes it here. So he comes back very frequently. And we don't have a program for him yet, but frankly, as I say, he can play whatever he wants.
Just turn him loose, right?
That's it. Just absolutely.
Okay.
And next is
But wait,
Brussels.
there's a piano. There's also going to be De Silva piano.
Yes, Rohan De Silva, yes. He comes with him most of the times he's been here. And Rohan has a real following here in South Florida. So, yes, definitely welcoming him back.
Okay, now it's funny. All this is Europe. Well, we had some in the United States, but now we have another major European orchestra.
Right. And Brussels Philharmonic, they're making their Kravis Center Regional Arts debut also. But they're coming with conductor Stéphane Deneuve, who has been with us before when he conducted the Philadelphia Orchestra here. So he always brings spectacular programs. Wonderful conductor, very communicative. People seem to just really love him.
What's the difference in a philharmonic and a symphony orchestra?
Basically not a thing except the title. The Philharmonic, basically, you can call it a Philharmonic Orchestra or a Symphony Orchestra or Philharmonia or Symphonia. Usually the Symphonia and Philharmonia are slightly smaller in size, but otherwise the names are pretty much interchangeable.
Yeah, okay. I was always curious about that. Wondered who Phil was. Okay, that's right. Okay, so, and now the next one is just splendid.
Oh, yes. Sir James Galway as the flutist you always want to hear. He's coming back again to the Kravis Center, and this time he's bringing, of course, since he's in March, he's bringing quite a bit of Irish music along with the classics. So it's going to be a jam, let's put it that way.
Right. Okay, yeah, maybe we are going to get through some of these before we... Yeah, I think we will. Go ahead.
Okay, and we close out the season with the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. And it's the leadership of Joanne Falletta has really put this orchestra on the map. Originally, when we started bringing them in, people would say, Buffalo? Why would you want Buffalo when you've got Chicago and Philadelphia?
Right.
And we say because they're up and coming. There for a while, National Public Radio, what's the name of that? Performance Today is the name of that program.
Yes.
They would make Buffalo Philharmonic was kind of like their local band. They were always broadcasting Buffalo concerts. So it's going to be wonderful to have them back with Fabio Bedini as pianist. Joanne Falletta is just a delight. I can't imagine a more personable and artistic leadership for that orchestra. And basically, they're going to be the dramatic group. They're going to play the Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet suite, which
Lovely.
is so powerful and so wonderful. And that closes off the season.
So let's give us some ways that people now can order their tickets. Remember, this is all happening at the Raymond Kravis Center for the Performing Arts up in West Palm Beach. And you can call the box office, which is 561-832-7469. Yes? That's right.
7469.
Right.
That's it.
Let's do that again. Get your pencils out. Remember, this is Pencil Talk Radio. Got to write it down. It's 561-832-7469, or they can go to Kravis.org, right? And
Right.
also buy the
There's
tickets.
also an 800 number if you're living outside the area.
Uh-huh.
It's 800-572-8471.
Okay, 572-8471. For those of you, though, who have not ever been to one of the regional arts concerts, there are many others. We just touched. Now, there are other things that you do also, aren't there? We didn't have time to go through all of it.
Oh, right. Basically, I give the pre-concert talks before each of the regional arts concerts. And that's basically giving audience members an idea of the composer's life, the music that they're about to hear, and what's unique or different about it. And also placing that piece of music in history. What was going on around the world? What was going on in this composer's life? Just to give you a sense of understanding a little bit more about what you might hear in the music.
I think that is just great. They're starting to do that in theater, too, as you know. Sometimes they do it after, but I like it before. And I think that is just, you will enjoy the music so much more. And it takes a lot of work on your part, though. It's a lot of history that you have to put together, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. But it's for me a labor of love. I love researching this stuff. You know, these composers are just fascinating people as far as I'm concerned. So.
Right. Do you still play the piano?
No, the only keyboard I play is the computer keyboard.
Oh, no. Yeah, well, that's, I'm sure you're just so busy, and I know that. But there are these community orchestras, and maybe something you want to do because you never give that up, It's in your soul.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
But so people, if you're interested in volunteering, I always notice that when I go to the Kravis Center, there are many volunteers, and even though they have to work a little bit there, they get to hear in all these great concerts, or whether it's
absolutely.
Any of the other shows. So you can get on Kravis.org, and there'll be also a symbol for volunteers. You can ask if you can do that, but I'm sure Sharon would be more than happy to have you be a volunteer for these extraordinary concerts.
Absolutely. It would be really a pleasure.
So what now? I bet that you've already started working on your 2020.
Yes, we have. We've got it all put together.
Have you really?
Yes. Actually, we're working on 2021 as well.
Oh, my.
So it gets a little confusing sometimes because you remember an orchestra is coming. You can't remember which season it is.
Oh, that's good. Well, I can understand why it's important because these orchestras have to have a schedule themselves, and they have to know where they're going. And as you said, if they can book it here, maybe then they can do something else on the East Coast.
Exactly.
To keep it all going. So,
and some of these orchestras, too, get contributions from their governments or from foundations. And this takes a while to set those in place. So they've got to say, we're going to the United States, and it's going to be in February 2020, and here's what we need to support this group. So it takes a lot of advance work.
Obviously it does. And I was thinking, though, how when you talked about the Romanian orchestra coming in, a lot of people have to be put up. It's very expensive besides flying them in and putting them up in these hotels.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's worth every dollar.
As far as we're concerned, very definitely, yeah.
But you can imagine also when other places are so cold and they get to come down to South Florida, they must love it.
Every once in a while, if someone's reluctant to come in December or January, I say, well, wouldn't you like a warm Florida vacation?
That's true. No, that's what they don't get to spend much time. But so most of the concerts, though, it's really 1 or 2 days, right? They're not going to stay here longer.
Right. There are some concerts, some orchestras that'll play 8 p.m. one night and then 2 p.m. the next afternoon. But that's the most they're there for.
But now we have the Arts Center and the Broward Center, so probably I would think they would get booked in each one of those places, wouldn't they?
They might. I'm afraid to admit that Arsht and Broward have cut back so much on their classical music offerings that sometimes maybe they can play in Tallahassee as well as at the Kravis Center, but oftentimes there's not another opportunity in South Florida. We do have Naples.
Really?
Artist Naples is a wonderful hall, and they do book a lot of touring orchestras also.
Oh, that's excellent. I was thinking as you were saying this that it's called money, and so many orchestras, like in South Florida, we have begged to have a major orchestra here. They tried so often to do that. They never were successful. And here in South Florida, there's a lot of money, but somehow, and I have other reasons and I won't go into that, but that's really important. It takes a lot of money, but you have to have some real patrons, and apparently these people find them. But Sharon, I've enjoyed this so much, and I will definitely, I want to go to them. I want to see each one of them, and I want to be able to have you back again, and I will send you the copy of the November issue.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks so much for everything.
It was a pleasure talking with you.